There's a question I ask writers when they bring me a character they've been struggling with. I ask them, did you find this character or did you build them? It sounds philosophical. It isn't. It's diagnostic. And the answer tells me almost everything I need to know about why the character is or isn't working. My name is Ted Baker. I spent 35 years in behavioral diagnostics and executive coaching before I became a writing instructor. And the distinction I just described, finding versus building, is the single most important concept I've carried from that career into the work I do with fiction writers. Let me tell you what it looks like in practice. When I was still in the corporate world, I was occasionally brought in to assess executives who were described as high potential but somehow self-limiting. People who were technically excellent but kept hitting the same ceiling, who made the same category of decision under pressure even when they could see it wasn't serving them. My job was to figure out why. And what I learned very quickly was that the wrong approach was to look at who they appeared to be and construct a psychological explanation that fit the observed behavior. That's building. You're manufacturing a narrative that's coherent and plausible and satisfying. The right approach was to keep asking questions until the person revealed something they hadn't planned to reveal, until a pattern surfaced that neither of us had been looking for, until the real thing emerged. That's finding. The difference between those two approaches produced completely different results. The first gave me a character, a coherent, believable, internally consistent explanation. The second gave me a person, something surprising, specific, and true. Writers face exactly this choice every time they sit down to develop a character. And most of the time, without realizing it, they build. Here's how you know you're building rather than finding. The character's psychology is tidy. Everything connects cleanly. The backstory explains the behavior in a way that feels like a closed loop. There are no jagged edges. There are no elements that surprise even you. The character behaves exactly as their backstory would predict. That tidiness is the tell. Real people and characters who feel like real people are not tidy. They contain contradictions they can't fully account for. They know something is driving them, but can't quite name it. Their behavior occasionally surprises even themselves. When a character surprises their own author, that's almost always a sign that something real has been found. Now let me be direct about something, because I think it's important. Invention is not a moral failure. Every writer invents. The question is whether you stop there. Invention is the starting hypothesis. It's the first draft of the character's psychology. You ask yourself what kind of wound would create this belief, and you land on something plausible. That's not the end of the process. That's the beginning of the excavation. The work is to take that hypothesis and pressure test it, to ask, does this feel constructed or does it feel found? To sit with it long enough that either it deepens into something true or it reveals itself as a convenient fiction that needs to be replaced. Here's a concrete distinction I use. When you've invented something, you can explain it. You can walk me through the logic. You can describe how A led to B led to C. The explanation is smooth and available. When you've discovered something, you often can't fully explain it yet. You know it's right before you can articulate why. The connection feels immediate rather than constructed. You recognize it more than you reason toward it. That recognition, that moment of, this is it, I don't know how I know, but I know, is the signal you found something real. I want to walk you through what this looks like with a well-known character, because I think it makes the distinction concrete. Consider Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games. If a writer sat down to build a character who would volunteer to replace their younger sibling in a death match, they might construct something like this. Loving older sibling, strong protective instinct, family history of sacrifice. Plausible, coherent, forgettable. What Suzanne Collins gave us is something that feels found. Katniss doesn't volunteer from love primarily. She volunteers from something that looks like love, but functions more like a compulsion. An inability to be the person who didn't act. A self-concept so tied to protection that the alternative, watching and doing nothing, would constitute a kind of self-annihilation. That's not constructed. That's excavated. You can feel the difference on the page. The behavior is the same in both versions. She volunteers. But the psychology in the second version has depth and complexity and contradiction in it. She's not noble. She's driven. There's a difference. Now here's the practical question. How do you actually do this? How do you move from invention to discovery in your own work? I'll give you 3 markers to watch for. The first is resistance. When you're getting close to something real in a character's psychology, you'll often feel a pull toward a safer, more comfortable version. The instinct will offer you something more defensible, more socially acceptable, more narratively conventional. That pull toward the safer version is useful information. It tells you you're near something that actually has charge. The second is specificity that arrives uninvited. You're thinking about a character's past, and a detail surfaces that you didn't plan. A specific object, a specific room, a specific face. You don't know where it came from, but it feels right in a way that your planned details don't. That uninvited specificity is discovery. The third is when the character starts behaving in ways that complicate your plot. When what they would actually do, given what you now know about them, creates problems for the story you intended to tell. That friction is almost always a sign that something true has surfaced. Invented characters cooperate. Discovered characters insist. I want to close with something I say to almost every writer I work with at some point. You know more about your character than you think you do. The information is already there, in the scenes you've written, in the choices you've made intuitively, in the moments that have stayed with you even when you couldn't explain why. The work isn't to manufacture a psychology from scratch. The work is to learn to access what you already know. That's the difference between excavation and fabrication, between finding and building. And that difference, over the course of a novel, is the difference between a character a reader forgets and a character a reader carries with them. If this approach to character resonates with you, it's the foundation of everything I teach in Stratum, my AI character coaching course for fiction writers. The course is built on one principle. The psychology is already there. Your job is to excavate it.